All right, everyone, welcome to Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by our good friends here at Mile High Sports. I'm your host, Ryan Blackburn at NBA Blackburn on Twitter, part of the Mile High Sports Podcast Network. And I'm here. I am ready to discuss the NBA draft, or kind of a limited discussion of the NBA draft, if I have to be honest, because I'm not going to lie. With Denver not having a lot of like zero picks in the draft this year, and with them basically being in this situation where there's just a lot of focus on the playoffs. There's a lot of focus on the veterans, not necessarily like they already have young guys who are trying to develop. Not really a surprise that adding more young guys, adding more folks into the mix, especially when it was as contentious as it was for the Nuggets this last season between Michael Malone and Calvin Booth. Not really a surprise to me that Denver not having any picks, it's not a problem. Like it's not awesome. You would like it from a value standpoint. You'd like it from an asset standpoint for sure. But from a player standpoint, I'm not necessarily sure if it's that big of a deal. Other folks think a little bit differently about it, but I'm going to do what I think I can. We're about a week away from the NBA draft. This is going to come out on Thursday morning. The draft is on next Wednesday, June 25th. That is the first round. And then the second round will be June 26th. Denver will have a gathering of sorts for media during that time, which I will probably attend. I haven't fully decided what I'm going to do from a content perspective yet around the draft, but I think I will probably be there just in case if there's any press conference that happens. But for a presser, you probably should have a general manager, and Denver still doesn't have that, at least in a full-time capacity. So there's still a lot of things in flux from the Nugget situation. But first segment, we'll talk about, is it worth it to get back into the NBA draft in any concept? I'll talk about a couple of notes that came out about the Nuggets over the course of these past couple weeks. And then second segment, I'm going to talk about the teams that will probably alter the draft. I'm not going to talk about a whole bunch of specific players because I'm not the knowledgeable source of information on this year's draft class. If there are other folks that are super invested in the draft, make sure to go follow CT Fazio, who I've had on this show before. Go follow his work on Twitter. He's always talking about the draft and very invested in it. And then some of the national guys, Kevin O'Connor does it pretty consistently. I like Sam Vecini's work over at The Athletic. And so I'll lean on those guys if Denver adds an undrafted free agent or a second round pick, get into that. And I hope that doesn't come as a surprise to anybody throughout this process, because I got to be honest, I'm very much more focused on Denver's current roster and their current situation. And if they ever get back into it, then like into the draft aspect of things, then I will get invested. But until then, it has been very difficult to really lock in on who is good all the way throughout the draft when Denver doesn't have a pick. So a couple days ago, Om Yomasuk of ESPN, more of a focus on the LA markets with the LA Clippers, but also does some dual work for Denver, has some sources within Denver. He reported that the Nuggets had 4 players in for a draft workout. Caleb Love, an Arizona guard, Hunter Dickinson, a Kansas center who also played at Michigan for a while, Bradley forward Darius Hannah, who I had to look up. I also had to look up whether Bradley was a D1 school or not. They are in the Missouri Valley Conference, the MVC. And Indiana center Omar Ballo, who also played at Arizona alongside a couple of other NBA guys. And so obviously they had a little bit of a link up. Or was Caleb Love there the year before too? I'm not sure. But either way, I went to my trusty sources, the ESPN Top 100 and the Sam Vecini Top 100, and Caleb Love is ranked 75th and 63rd in those top 100s respectively. The other guys are not rated. The other guys are not in that top 100 mix. So to give you a perspective on the kinds of players that Denver's working out, I believe there are either 58 or 59 picks in the draft this year. So these are undrafted guys, potential free agent guys. They're trying to get a picture of different two-way players that they could add to the team. And if you remember in this process, even though Denver doesn't have a pick, they still have two-way contracts to kind of fill out. And so their scouting department, who has been at work, Rafael Juk, of course, international scout, very important, integral part of the Nuggets organization. Uh, he and the rest of the draft team certainly continuing to look at a variety of different things, a variety of different players, different talents that they can get at different places, but mostly at the college free agent class. And they'll have 3 different free agents to fill out. They could technically try to get back Trey Alexander, PJ Hall, and Spencer Jones. And honestly, like with Denver not having any picks, I would not be against Denver bringing back any or all of those guys on two-way contracts. Now, the problem that you run into, though, is that when you are talking about limited roster spots and adding players to full-time deals, that's where things get dicey, especially for a team like Denver that has such limited resources. I've talked about this before, especially when I talked about the end of the bench last week. Denver has 12 players that they have under contract. They have their starting 5, Jalen Pickett, Julian Strawther, Peyton Watson, Deron Holmes, Zeke Naji, Dario Saric, and Hunter Tyson. Those are the 7 guys off the bench plus the 5 starters. Russell Westbrook obviously opted out, and also kind of the sense that I'm getting, well, this will manifest a little bit closer to free agency. Sense I'm getting is that Russell Westbrook's probably not coming back, and Jalen Pickett or somebody else may have to step into that primary backup ball handler role. So this is obviously an important time to figure that process out. But so he is gone, or not gone. There's obviously a possibility that Russell Westbrook could come back. Nobody would write that off, but it does feel like he's going to get some offers that Denver can't really match or may not want to. DeAndre Jordan and Vlatko Čanč are also unrestricted free agents. So between those 3 guys, Denver has 3 open roster spots that they can add to their team. Assume with me that they are adding a taxpayer mid-level exception guy. That leaves 2 roster spots unless they make trades, unless let's say they waived Dario Saric and tried or agreed to a buyout with him or something. That's one way that they could free up an extra roster spot. But because Denver has such a limited assets and they also have limited roster spots that they can turn over, to me, it is at least worth mentioning with regard to this draft conversation that this might be a good year for Denver to not be in the draft. I know it's a pretty solid draft by all accounts. 2026, by the way, said to be an even stronger draft by some people. But with regard to Denver this season, it's not the worst thing in the world that they don't have a pick in this upcoming year because they don't have the roster space in order to really account for that. In addition, they also have somebody like Deron Holmes, who I think people should be considering their quote-unquote draft pick for this upcoming season. He obviously got hurt last year. He was somebody that everybody was very excited about, including me. And I do think that Denver will be invested in his development going forward. So he hasn't played a single minute in the NBA. He will technically be a rookie. I know people would love to add more young talent if you could, but you want higher ceiling talent. And Denver, even if they had their first round pick this year, they're still adding like the 25th pick in the draft, which is not a high ceiling player by any stretch. So could Denver get lucky? Of course. And you always have that card that you can play. Could Denver get lucky with an undrafted free agent? Yeah, it's less likely, but still possible. So something to think about in this entire process. If Denver were to get involved, like let's say they are trading into the second round, say they're even trading into the first round, I think the focus for the team should continue to be on the wings. And the reason why I say that, Um, yes, there's a need at backup point guard, especially if Russell Westbrook is gone. Jalen Pickett may or may not be able to step into that. Denver, I assume, if Russell Westbrook was gone, would try to fill that need in free agency in some way. But beyond that, when you look at Denver's wing positions right now, I'm gonna go through it. Christian Brown, somebody that they feel pretty strong about, that they feel committed to. He has weaknesses though, and you would like to be able to mix and match different skill sets if you can. Michael Porter Jr., more of a forward than anything, probably should be moving to power forward a little bit more consistently in his career. Peyton Watson is the guy that often pushes him to power forward in a lot of these lineups, or when Denver decides to go small. But Peyton Watson's not much of a shooter either. So Denver needs shooters. Now they've got Julian Strother, and that's about it. Like Aaron Gordon is a true forward. He's not a wing, at least not anymore. And Hunter Tyson, I think of as a little bit too slow and probably not somebody that I think can play for Denver in a playoff series and be consistent. Now, there's always a possibility that I'm wrong about that, but Denver in previous years, especially during the championship season, was a lot stronger on the wings. You had KCP, you had a quicker and more athletic version of Michael Porter. You had Christian Brown coming off the bench, you had Bruce Brown coming off the bench, and that was just a little bit more well-rounded. And Denver had some versatility there. They like Christian Brown is like depending on how you feel about Michael Porter going forward, Christian Brown might be your best wing on the team now, and especially if Michael Porter's getting played out of position. Before he was fourth. And so Denver is in a difficult position now where they've lost a lot of talent on the wing, haven't really replaced it well. And they either need Julian Strother or Peyton Watson to take a step forward and really deserve those minutes, or you need to find a way to add more talent. And so if I'm Denver, I'm looking at the draft. I'm not going to again go not going through specific guys here, not going to try to act like I know what I'm talking about on this front. It's not my job at this point with Denver not having a draft pick. It's the Nuggets. If they feel so inclined to trade into the draft for somebody, I think it should be for a true small forward, somebody who is in that 6'7, 6'8 range, good shooter, good defender, just traditional 3 and D, somebody that should be a pretty easy fit into what you're trying to do. Because if you have those players, it makes building lineups and building rotations so much simpler, just so much simpler. Right now, Denver doesn't have that, and they have a lot of concerns with spacing. If you bring in a guy that you know can space the floor, you can kind of mix and match different groups. Maybe you get that player and Michael Porter and Julian Strother out there, but the player that you're bringing in can defend. And then you don't lose that much on the defensive end as a result. So that's what I'm thinking about in this process. I think that Denver really should be focusing on getting more wing focused as a team. I think that goes in the draft. I think that goes in free agency. And I think that goes in trades. Looking at the free agency market, it is very difficult to see a good quality wing that might be willing to sign in Denver. So, like a guy like Zaire Williams, for example, restricted free agent. Other teams might be more willing to, I guess, give him a shot, give him an opportunity, kind of like what I would want for Denver. But for Denver, they have such a positional need there that I do think that it is a very massive opportunity for them to just add a couple of players like that. Maybe Spencer Jones could be like that. Not necessarily, I don't think that he's the right guy for this, but, and maybe the guys that Denver can get are going to be a lot like Spencer Jones. So if that's the case, then maybe you don't do it. Maybe you save your ammo and you just wait for the right opportunity in the future. But it is something I'm thinking about. It's something I think the Nuggets need to think about. And I hope that they continue to focus like on the small forward position specifically. This isn't the Michael Porter thing. This is the fact that even if Michael Porter stays with the Nuggets, I think that his best position going forward is going to be as a small ball four, somebody who really stretches the floor, not necessarily somebody who is just on the three, needing to handle the ball, needing to switch on the perimeter, do those things. He will be better used as a power forward, in my opinion. Okay, let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the teams that could alter and shape the draft and whether Denver should get involved with those guys. We'll be right back here on Pickaxe and Roll. All right, we are back. Pickaxe and Roll, Ryan Blackburn here. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Would really, really appreciate it. Okay. The teams that could alter and shape the draft. Every year, I think it's important to go into the draft expecting that some team will make a trade, some team will make a splash. Maybe there will be a big player that is traded, maybe there will not. But I do think that if there was to be something that happened, these are the teams that I would focus on. I've got 7 teams here. The first is San Antonio, who have the second overall pick, the 14th pick, and a bunch of reasons to be aggressive for this upcoming season. I really like what I've seen from like their particular mix, and I think that they are in a really good, interesting place as a team. They are talking about Kevin Durant, probably not putting out a lot of great offers for him. That's not necessarily the direction that I would go if I were them, because they are still developing. They are obviously trying to get better, but there are ways that they can thread the needle a little bit more without giving up a whole bunch of assets for Kevin Durant. Would Denver get involved with them? I'm not sure what it would look like, but and I'm not even sure what the Spurs would be looking for. But around De'Aaron Fox, Devin Vassell, and Victor Wembanyama and Stephon Castle, who just won Rookie of the Year this past year, they could probably use some size in the front court to go alongside Wemby. They could probably use even more versatile athletes and shooters and players of that nature. So maybe they are looking for Julian Strawther, or maybe they decide, hey, we want a more on ball perimeter defender that can be on the wing. Maybe they're looking for Peyton Watson. Um, you have to be open to things like that if you're the Nuggets. You have to be willing and able to answer those calls. I don't think that Denver, like, would you trade the 14th pick for Peyton Watson? You probably should if you're Denver, from the perspective of Peyton Watson is either A, about to get way more expensive, or B, like, may not be as good as the 14th overall pick. He was the 30th pick back in 2022. Obviously, he's developed pretty well. Maybe a starter, maybe not going forward, but not everybody's a starter in the NBA, and not everybody's a starter in every draft class. So will be interesting to see. But those are the kinds of deals that if you're San Antonio, you might be willing to look for. But I don't know if I would necessarily agree for them to do that if I was Denver. Next up, Philly. They have the 3rd overall pick. There was a report that actually came out tonight on Wednesday night, June 18th, that Ace Bailey, who was once considered a possible number 1 overall pick, but not really. He was very much considered behind Cooper Flagg. He canceled his workout with Philly. And apparently the rumors that he didn't get a promise from them, so he canceled. That's a pretty weird thing. Obviously, his representation has a view of how he should be viewed, but either way, Philly is going to be at the center of a lot of different things. They obviously have a very interesting pathway for their particular team, whether it's Joel Embiid involved in it, whether it's moving past whoever Joel Embiid is involved with, and they just look at Tyrese Maxey, Jared McCain, re-signing Quentin Grimes. Like there is a world where Philly just kind of continues to build for the future. And maybe they draft well, they're probably not drafting Bailey at this point, but maybe they will. Who knows? But is it possible that they trade down? Is it possible that they trade that pick for another player, somebody that's in the league already? Not really sure. Do I think that Denver can or should get involved with Philly? I'm not sure about the mechanisms. I'm not even sure about what they want. So can't really expect anything there. And especially not for the third overall pick. Denver doesn't have a single asset other than Jokic that is as valuable as the third overall pick, at least not in my opinion. All right. Next is New Orleans, who might be more willing to deal with Denver. They have the seventh, and I think they have the 23rd pick in the draft after just making a draft day, or not a draft day trade. They traded with Indiana either yesterday or the day before and sent Indiana's 2026 first round pick back to them for the 23rd pick in the draft this year. Interesting trade. Indiana saves some money. They also get back control of their own pick, which is probably a good thing. But the Pelicans could do a variety of different things. They are another team that, like, in a really tough place as an organization. There was also something that came out with DeJounte Murray yesterday. Obviously, he tore his Achilles earlier in the season. Zion Williamson is a major injury risk himself. They traded Brandon Ingram. CJ McCollum's on a expiring contract. Trey Murphy has been in trade rumors despite the fact that he's probably their best player or most consistent player, that's for sure. Zion's their best player, but Trey Murphy's been really good. And then Herb Jones is the belle of the ball for everybody. And like that's going to be a player that everybody wants, but nobody has the assets to actually give up for what New Orleans would give him up for. Like that's a 2 first-round picks or a first-round pick and a quality prospect kind of player. And I just don't think Denver can get involved with that. But maybe there's a way that they get involved and go get the 23rd pick. Is that a Michael Porter destination? Probably not. But could it be a Peyton Watson or Julian Strawther destination? Julian Strawther, I mean, they like shooting. They like shooting over there. Deron Holmes would also be a very interesting player. If Denver decided they didn't want to develop Deron Holmes, I think that'd be kind of schemy. But Deron Holmes is somebody that could, in theory, be a center option for them in New Orleans, along with Yves Missi. And they need somebody who can space the floor. Yves Missi is not that guy. Deron Holmes, in theory, can be. So we will see what happens with New Orleans, but they're a team I have my eye on. Not necessarily for the Nuggets perspective, but just as a team that could go in any variety of different directions. Toronto is the next team. They're a team that's been a lot of rumors. They've been trying to budge their way into the Kevin Durant sweepstakes, even with knowing that he is not somebody that, like, they are not a team that he's willing to re-sign with. They have the 9th pick, and apparently it's been described as an 8-player draft. Not a great place if you have the 9th pick, but it's also why I think that pick has been in trade rumors. A lot of people, Jake Fisher, Mark Stein, ESPN, Sam Vecini, and some of the Toronto folks have noted that pick seems to be available for trade. In all likelihood, they'll still probably draft. They'll still probably take somebody because that's just how these things work. But I do think that Masai Ujiri, Toronto, I think Masai's in an expiring deal. So they are going to be aggressive. They're probably going to really try to maneuver this thing around Scotty Barnes and around Brandon Ingram. They already have Emmanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett and Jakob Pertl and guys like that. They've got some young players that they like, but still very far away from being good. Could they try to flip some of those other PC veterans and try to go get a star like Kevin Durant? That would be crazy. Or could they make a splash trying to go get another point guard or somebody else on the market? Like, you never know who's going to be available at this time, but Toronto appears to be a team that really wants to deal. So just wouldn't surprise me if you hear some major trade rumors coming from them. Oklahoma City is the next team. I've talked about this before on a couple of different platforms, but they have the 15th and the 24th overall pick. They also have, I think, 13 or 14 players that are set to come back for next season. So they're going to run out of roster spots really quickly. And it just would not surprise me if they decide, you know what, we want to consolidate a little bit. We're going to let a guy go here. We're going to trade a pick, or let's say they trade the 15th and the 24th pick to try to move up to 10 or something like that. That would not surprise me at all. And or maybe it's 9, maybe it's Toronto, honestly. Like that wouldn't surprise me. And they're going to try to consolidate, get the best possible player that they can, whether it's a veteran or whether it's a rookie in this class. But OKC, once again, very active. They had a prior relationship with the Nuggets. Not sure what that relationship looks like now, especially with Denver losing to OKC in the playoffs. OKC owns 2 of Denver's future first round picks in 2027 and 2029. Could they make it a hat trick and go give them the 2031 pick for the 15th pick in this draft? That would be fascinating, wouldn't it? That would be a very interesting deal. But something to think about if Denver is very adamant about a player that they like in this draft. So keep them in mind. 2 more teams here, Brooklyn and Atlanta. Brooklyn is they're the team that has the most flexibility. Like even OKC doesn't have as much flexibility because they have players that they are committed to and want to be committed to. Brooklyn doesn't really have that problem. They've got 2 players that they care about in Cam Johnson and Nick Claxton, who are under contract. There's a few guys that are in restricted free agency, like a Cam Thomas, the aforementioned Zaire Williams, who I like. They've got a variety of other players. I think Day'Ron Sharpe, also a restricted free agent, though I expect him to be back with them. And they have a lot of reasons to be active at the NBA draft and in free agency. They also have 4 first-round picks. I believe they have the 8th pick, the 19th pick, the 26th, and 27th overall picks. So that is a team that if you're looking to get active in the NBA draft, there's definitely reason to be checking them out for sure. Everybody and their mother in the Nuggets franchise and the Nuggets fandom wants Cam Johnson. I'm here to tell you it's very, very difficult for me to foresee Denver being able to put out enough value that says, yeah, we can send you Michael Porter and a 2031 first round pick for Cam Johnson. That's not value. That's not what is requisite value here. I think if I were telling Nuggets fan the actual value in a deal like that, it would take a first just to take Michael Porter Jr.'s contract for most of these teams. And then for Cam Johnson, they're probably looking for a first, maybe even more than that for themselves. So I got to imagine that Denver would have to send 2 firsts and maybe even another fringe pick. But that's the kind of situation that Brooklyn is in. They're trying to leverage having a very young, or not young, but a controllable player, controllable contract for the foreseeable future. It's a really good deal that he's on. And obviously, if you're Denver, you would like to have that on your books. But I think a lot of other teams are going to be thinking the same thing. And finally, the aforementioned Atlanta. They have the 13th and 22nd overall picks in this draft. They are looking for a new starting center, which is funny because they drafted Onyeka Okongwu with the 5th or 6th overall pick just a few years ago. They gave him an extension. It was a cheaper extension than I thought that they were going to give him. But a lot of the reason for that is they don't really believe in him, I don't think, as their starting center of the future. He's still a little bit small. He's undersized. And for Trae Young, for Jalen Johnson, for Zachary Risachet, the former first overall pick from last year, they are in a position, I think, where they can get a little bit aggressive. I think they've been talked about as the team for Miles Turner. And so if that's a possibility, does Denver kind of thread themselves in as a third team in a deal, try to get the 22nd overall pick, get the 13th overall pick. Maybe they're giving up one of their young assets in the process to kind of facilitate that deal. Who knows? But I do think that that's at least something to check. Atlanta is one of those teams that is going to be aggressive looking for some things. So the long and short of it for Denver, they don't have a lot of assets to like just go get involved in a lot of these things. They have to be very proactive about being a third team with all these deals, unless they are directly offering somebody like a Peyton Watson or Julian Strother or even a Christian Brown in these cases. If Denver's like, nope, nobody's really going to take the core four. They would take Aaron Gordon. They obviously take Nikola Jokic, but Michael Porter, Jamal Murray, those guys are not really players that you find dealt over the draft period. That would be a deeper into the summer kind of thing if Denver did decide to go that direction, and I don't think that they will. But outside of those guys, like Zeke Najee's not moving the needle for these teams. Hunter Tyson, Jalen Pickett, same thing. Like maybe you could flip Jalen Pickett for a second-round pick for a team that has seen what he can do and is like, you know what? Sure, we'll get a guy that's already a little bit seasoned. But I don't think that Denver is going to be getting involved in this draft. I'm going through this process because I think it's the right thing to do for the content. But I think that more than likely, Denver will be extremely quiet and do nothing other than sign 2, maybe 3 college free agents and put them on 2-way contracts. That would be my expectation. And we will see what ultimately happens with it. But yeah, I think that Denver will be treating Deron Holmes as their 2025 first round pick, despite the fact that he was drafted 2024 because he didn't play. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's fine. Like, I'm excited to watch Deron Holmes. I know a lot of other people are too. I know a lot of other people are also a little bit disappointed that they don't get to think about the shiny new player from this particular draft class. So we'll see if that changes. But for now, that is going to do it for this episode of Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by our good friends here at Mile High Sports. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button on the way out. I will talk to you guys next week.